Hundreds of unwanted guns were destroyed today during a new event in Albuquerque. Guns to Gardens. It's a buyback event. From pistols, long guns, even firearms illegally altered, they were turned into garden tools. Chase Golightly was there to see how all this worked, with all those guns being brought in and dropped off, no questions asked, even stolen guns.
The line of cars circled around La Mesa Presbyterian Church this afternoon. We are keeping those people anonymous, but what you will see is what happens right when those guns are turned in.
One by one, 240 pistols, rifles, shotguns, revolvers, even extended magazines were brought in to never be used again. Literally filling buckets with guns.
We've never seen this many guns come in.
Branda Vizcoli with New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence helped set this up. People coming in, dropping off their guns anonymously.
He was an NRA member and a veteran. He brought in his guns because of the Texas shooting.
We have a lot of widows that say, look, I just want to get these out of my home.
Gary Coffin with the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office also surprised with the turnout. Some of these guns you can't find at any gun shop.
This is a fully automatic Tech 9. It was donated earlier this morning. The gentleman said he wanted to get a fully automatic weapon off the streets.
Others were illegally altered.
Surprising amount of sawed-off shotguns, both single barrel and double barrel.
Each one that came in was inspected by a police officer and run through the National Crime Information Center.
Then we have identified several stolen weapons today.
Then this is the final step.
We have to cut the frame, we have to cut the trigger, and we have to cut the chamber.
Making sure each gun can no longer be used.
I think it shows that our communities are tired of the gun violence.
Hoping this will help keep streets here in Albuquerque safer.
Each person who turned in a firearm was given a choice of a gift card of up to $250 per gun. New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence say they will have another one of these events next month in Santa Fe. Chase Golightly, KOB4.
What a great response to the first gun buyback at the La Mesa Church. And people up in Santa Fe, heads up for a similar event coming soon. We've had Miranda and New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence on the show a few times, and the Peace Center is looking forward to building a strong relationship and partnership with them. And some other pending partnerships include Lumen Wellness and the Inside Out Experience, and I'll interview those folks later on in the show. Good morning, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and welcome to That Saturday Show, produced by the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, where we strive to create a world where our collective needs are met sustainably and nonviolently. We value the interconnectedness of all life. We emphasize cooperation and respect for diversity. We are committed to nonviolent conflict transformation, community accountability, and working for peace and justice within ourselves and our community and our world. I'm your host, Tom Dent, and I'm going in for some serious back surgery this Monday. That's going to knock me out for about 3 weeks. So we're planning to either put together some composite shows or reruns in the meantime. We should return on July the 16th, but that's not bad after 80 straight shows, 80 straight episodes. The Peace Center is closed this Monday for the federal Juneteenth holiday, and we're giving our staff the rest of the week off, but regular events such as their Saturday food distribution, yoga, meditation, open discussion, and the award-winning Peace Cafe on Thursday from 10 till 3 will still go on as planned. It's possible that some really big events may occur while we're closed, and the show is on hiatus, such as the rumors right now about the Supreme Court taking action on overturning Roe versus Wade. If workshops, rallies, or protests are planned, please check the Peace Center's Facebook page, the That Saturday Show's Facebook page, and our newly revamped newsletter. We've got a jam-packed and very informative show coming up in honor of Pride Month. We have Marshall Martinez, the Executive Director of Equality in New Mexico, the great community organizer and one of the founders of Albuquerque Mutual Aid, Selinda Guerrero, here to talk about the People's Juneteenth celebration that's going to happen today and this evening at Roosevelt Park. And I interview Justin Allen about pursuing the restoration of, or giving voting rights to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. As I said before, we have Pepper Joy and PJ of the Inside Out Experience, which is a mental and physical trauma healing group. And finally, a great song, an environmental and political song by Striving called The Beginning of the End. Now let's quickly go to our little feature, Goofy Photos, not goofy videos like I said last week. Let's see our first one. Well, we win the Booby Prize there. And number 2. Ooh, there's Lloyd typically sneaks in photos that I have no idea of. Let's see what's going on there. Is that a dog trapped in a cheeseburger? It's a dog in a donut. Okay. Social distancing and wearing a mask in public since 1978. All right. Oh, boy. You know, Lloyd is a professional photographer, so I don't know if he did this himself, but he comes up with some strange stuff and some pretty award-winning black and whites. And here we are on the subway train, and this guy wants to tune out reality in the world, and the other guy behind him doesn't look that happy for some reason. Oh, I love this one. This is the first one I downloaded from Facebook. You have to look at the tiny lettering really quickly. It's inpatient parking only, and down below it says, the unauthorized vehicles will be towed at the patient's expense, not the patient, not the hospital patient, the patient expense. Grammar is always, you know, I'm sure we all feel this way. It's summer, it's 100-degree heat, we're trying to not go crazy with the kids back home out of school, traveling around, everything's happening. You know what? You just gotta hang in there. And this is looks like Mr. Wahlberg in a standard meme, but I love this. News, there's a deadly heat wave coming. And New Mexicans? You mean summer? Here's our final one, and we can see what this cow or bull's opinion is. Looks like it needs a little tongue brush, but it's happy to be on that Saturday show. And now, with me in the studio is Marshall Martinez, the Executive Director of Equality New Mexico, and he's here to talk to us about Pride Month and LGBTQ plus issues across the state. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we really wanted to get you or somebody else last week to talk about Pride and all the events that were happening. A little behind, but we're really happy that you're here to tell us about what happened and to talk about Pride Month in general. And apparently your group is not just Albuquerque, but covers the entire state.
Yeah, Equality New Mexico is a statewide LGBTQ advocacy and political organization. We are 29 years old, and we've been doing work to shift systems and shift policy to achieve liberation for queer and trans people in all 33 counties for our entire existence. And that sometimes means marching in a very long, very hot, but really fun Pride Parade last weekend in Albuquerque.
Wow. And be careful working in Otero County. All sorts of strange things happen there.
That's where I'm from, so I'm
really?
particularly familiar.
Oh my God, Cowboys for Trump, and what is this thing we think the voting machines may be wrong? It's crazy. So, how long have you been executive director, and how many people are on your staff?
Yeah, I took over as executive director of Equality New Mexico in August of 2020. Highly recommend taking over a statewide organization during a global pandemic. Great time, good fun. But this is my 4th iteration as a staff person or board member with Equality New Mexico. So I've been around for a long time in and out of this movement. And we have myself as a full-time staff person and then 2 part-time staff people who are not located in Albuquerque, one in Las Cruces and one in northern New Mexico. And so that really small but very mighty team is responsible for doing a lot of work across the state, especially lately, we've been doing a lot of work around policies that are being proposed in local school districts, policies that are being proposed in local municipal and county level, And then, of course, we're always working at the state level around legislation. And this month, we're super excited to be honoring Pride, which is, for us, it means mourning the folks who should be with us, who aren't here because of violence, because of the response to the HIV epidemic that took a generation of gay and bisexual men who should be our mentors. And also about really celebrating the resilience of this movement, because despite all of the things that this society and that these systems have done to stop us from existing, the proof was here on Saturday in Albuquerque that we exist in the thousands. We're a part of every family, we're a part of every community, and many of us just keep going. And so this month is about honoring that history, and it's a lot about celebrating those of us who've made it through and recommitting to continue that work.
Well, I know it was a really big event, and I heard that the management wanted to keep APD as far away as possible, and I guess people that were watching from afar, seeing the news, were hoping that nobody from different militant churches or whatever, like what happened in Idaho when they arrested the little funky army from across the U.S. That were all trapped in the U-Haul, ready to cause trouble there.
Yeah, we have been and continue to be super fortunate in New Mexico in that we don't experience the same level of extremism oftentimes toward the queer and trans community in Albuquerque and Santa Fe especially, that folks do across the country. That doesn't mean that we're not in danger. That doesn't mean that it's not unsafe oftentimes. But we were fortunate in Albuquerque. I walked the entire Pride Parade route, and I think I can recall 3 or 4 protesters at the most along the route, and none of them said anything particularly shocking or new. They reminded me of the passages in Leviticus and told me that I was going to a certain place after I die, and you know, that's not a newsflash to me. I've been hearing it since I was a small child. So, you know, but I think we were really fortunate that we didn't experience any violence. And I really applaud Albuquerque Pride, the board of directors, and the community leadership who listened to what this community has been saying for decades, really, which is that there is not a place for police and law enforcement in a Pride parade. Pride started as a celebration of a riot against police brutality, and until the police department, at a minimum, reforms itself by answering to this community, and I want to stress that's a minimum, that's not the expectation, that's the bare minimum, there's not a place for them, right? That Pride is about us being together, feeling safe, celebrating each other. As a young queer kid who grew up in rural southern New Mexico, Albuquerque Pride was the first place I ever went where I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder constantly, and I can't feel that way if there are cops there. Because they don't make me feel safer. They make me feel in danger.
Right. I think a lot of people in the activist community feel the same way. And we, some people that are coming on the show, and a lot of people at the Peace Center have been working for reform, if not defunding and complete rework of the police department, if necessary. Let's go back to the beginning. You were talking about the what was it, that terrible president that screwed up everything? Ronald Reagan tried to pretend that the AIDS and HIV crisis wasn't happening for what, 2 or 3 years, and what, 200,000 people died in the process. Kind of take us back to the beginning around there and before and up through Stonewall, if you would.
Yeah, so the Stonewall riots happened in 1969, and at that time it was against the law at a federal level and in all 50 states to exist as a queer or trans person. And so, you know, those laws didn't start to change until the early 70s. New Mexico repealed our anti-sodomy law in the mid-70s. We were one of the first states. We've always been a particularly progressive state, despite what other folks may think about us. But, you know, in the early 80s, when the HIV epidemic entered this world, what we know is that that president's administration, whose name I don't even like to say out loud, right? It became clear to them, first and foremost, that gay men were dying, and that was not an issue for them, and they didn't care very much. And as the virus began to spread, and they saw the continued sort of, that it became at epidemic levels, it continued to kill folks that, frankly, they didn't care that much about. And so we discovered the first HIV cases in the United States in 1981, and it was 1985 before a member of the federal administration mentioned HIV at a national level. It was 1986 before there was any federal budget that was allocated to research, to funding research, to funding prevention. Forget about thinking about a cure or even the medications. We didn't find medications that are prolonging people's lives until 2001. So from 1981 until 2001, people were dying of this disease. And then almost overnight, we suddenly had this phenomenal influx of new medications where folks who are living with HIV now are dying of the things that everybody else dies of, right? You can manage and live with the disease for quite a long time. And what we know scientifically now is that if you're medicated and you're in good treatment, you can't even transmit the virus to other people. And so we are within one generation of ending the epidemic. A lot of that is about the science that the way that science has evolved and the discoveries we've made, but so much of that is about who was in power back then and what they thought of us, right? And so when when I go to the Pride Parade, a very good friend of mine actually, we were talking about this last weekend. The Pride Parade goes from UNM all the way to Expo, New Mexico, and there's a significant chunk of that where there aren't many people. And she said, that's the place where I like to think that the gay and bisexual men and trans folks who died of HIV are taking up space. That's where they would have been if they were still allowed to be here. And I'd never thought about that before. And this year I thought about that and realized, as a young queer person, I came out at a time when people were still dying of this virus. And so I think especially during Pride Month about all the folks who should be there celebrating with us, who aren't, in large part because the people in power just didn't care about us back then. And then right now, the people in power in many communities and states across the country are not only not caring about us, but actively trying to get rid of us.
Yeah, they got trigger laws on the books, and we've got the pending Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade, and a lot of people say that some people that don't appreciate other communities than themselves will be ready to put forth the domino effect, first coming off same-sex marriage. What was it, on Wednesday, Oklahoma and Florida were trying to get CYFD to come in and prosecute parents that took their kids to a drag show.
Yeah, and I just have to say, as a drag queen of 16 years, I'll tell you who's in danger when kids are at drag shows. It's the drag queens, because kids get in front of us and then we trip. And then, but in reality, the reality is we are looking at gun violence epidemics in public schools. We are looking at teachers leaving in droves because they're not getting paid enough to do the jobs that they're doing. We're looking at young people who are being pushed into the, in the school to prison pipeline, being pushed into these spaces clearly that is going to send them on a trajectory that's unhealthy for them. And the focus right now is about whether or not we can have books in school libraries that include same-sex parents, whether or not parents can take their children to a drag show, whether or not a teacher can point out that their spouse is of the same sex rather than the opposite sex. And so we've got this movement right now, allied very closely with the extreme anti-abortion movement that is really looking at especially queer and trans people as that new wedge issue politically to try to really drive communities apart by othering. And the reality is, listen, as a Latino who was born and raised in New Mexico, we have big families. I don't know a single Latino who doesn't have a queer or trans person in their family. And usually there's 3 or 4 of us, right? And so we're a part of every community. We're in all of these families. The trauma that will happen to this generation of young people, I grew up in a time where we weren't mentioned, and so I felt like I was the only one, but I was fortunate not to grow up in a time where people debated my very existence in front of me. And we're in a space right now where Florida and Oklahoma, Texas, the Dakotas are all having conversations in front of queer and trans young people about their actual existence. And to connect that to the Roe versus Wade decision, the reality is every move that LGBTQ people have made in terms of progress was based on the right to privacy. The right to privacy didn't exist until the Roe decision was made. When this decision gets overturned, not if, but when this decision gets overturned, within 6 to 9 months, it will be illegal for 2 adult men to have consensual sexual relationships in over 13 states in this country. We will live in a country where it is no longer safe for me to travel again.
Well, that's too fascist for me and for probably everybody else that we know in this community. So we're almost done. It went really too fast. You really helped educate us greatly. Is there a website that we can contact you at? How can people get involved? How can people work on anti-bullying in school and helping these kids against, the alienation and obviously the some of the suicide figures are fairly grim.
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is eqnm.org, and I encourage folks to check out our website, join our movement, sign up on our email list. I don't have time to send a ton of emails, so you won't get 15 emails a day. But I think the thing that we have to focus on right now is that in New Mexico, queer and trans folks are mostly safe, and we have to make sure that continues to be the case. What's happening in Oklahoma, what's happening in Texas, we're not immune to it. We've done the work to prevent it, and we have to continue to build and grow our movement to continue to protect queer and trans folks who, by the way, are moving to New Mexico. Families from Arkansas, when they passed their anti-trans law, started looking into ways to relocate here. And so we welcome, obviously, all LGBTQ folks and definitely all of our allies and communities across the state. Join our movement. If what we're doing is right for you, we'll put you to work. And if it's not what we're doing, we'll connect you with the organizations that are doing counseling and support groups and direct services and finding safe spaces and all of those things. Because it's going to be a really rough few years to a decade for queer and trans folks, and we need everybody we can to join us.
Well, I know you're really busy. Happy Pride Month. Thank you very much for being with us. And now we're going to have a segment that we recorded at the Peace Center with Pepper Joy and PJ. Their group is called the Inside Out Experience, and they work on physical and mental trauma therapy that many of us could use. Hi, Tom Dent, That Saturday Show here at the Peace Center. Thank you, Selinda, for that great interview. Everybody, please attend the People's Juneteenth event today, this weekend. And with me is PJ and Pepper Joy, and they work with the Inside Out Experience, and they want to connect with the Peace Center and see what we're doing and see if they want to join us as a business supporter or a Pajola group or just work with us to serve the community. So, Pepper, let's start with you. What is your group about? What is your therapy and healing? What does this all involve?
Gotcha. So, the Inside Out Experience is our practice. We are both coaches. I'm a trauma recovery coach, and I'm trained in somatic work, which means body work. So we do body healing, and our practice hyper-focuses on mind, body, and soul. So we're addressing trauma, in particular childhood trauma, spiritual trauma, generational trauma, of course, and then
activist trauma,
activist trauma, all systemic and societal, cultural related traumas. We are well versed. We have both lived experience and training in how to handle these things.
Well, so. And James, you guys just moved here in the last year or two from Oklahoma, Philadelphia?
Well, I'm originally from Philadelphia. We met about 14 years ago in Oklahoma, and we've spent most of our marriage in Denver. But we decided to come to Albuquerque for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which, but we found the land of enchantment to be very enchanting, and have decided to stay here. And any place that we go, we want to be involved in helping to what we call heal the world forward.
Well, the Peace and Justice Center is a great hub to do that work and do outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. We are more of a wraparound service from therapy. We're peer-to-peer, so we don't tell people what to do. We walk them through their own healing journey with trauma.
Do you plan on setting up workshops here if you become a Pajola member? Or how can people connect with you once you're established with the Peace Center?
So our website, theinsideoutexperience.com, is a really great way to get a feel for who we are, what we do, how we do it. And then, of course, we'll be leaving some information here for people to pick up as they come through. But yeah, the possibilities are endless, and we're open to what the community tells us is their need.
That's right.
Well, we can't wait to connect with you. We've got some great Pajola groups here. We've got a lot of great outreach and direct services here at the Peace Center. We're growing. We're bringing people back from the pandemic and siloing with their Zoom meetings, and there's going to be a lot of stuff happening here at the Peace Center, and it'd be nice to have a little oasis where people can contact with your group and work on healing themselves.
Yes.
Yes, that is exactly what we do.
Like my wife is a nurse, and after and during the pandemic, everybody knows that our nurses and healthcare professionals seriously need trauma and traumatic healing.
Yeah, yeah. Compassion fatigue is really wrecking the medical field. And so we are finding that that is a definite need, a demand even. And so we're here to meet it. We're trained for that.
And not just the medical field, but basically any service that deals with the public, there is a tremendous amount of compassion fatigue. Restaurant servers, bartenders.
If you can find them now.
If
right?
you can find them.
Yeah, they're still around. They're struggling mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so we don't just follow the Western psychology model of addressing the mental piece. Or
addressing the symptoms.
Right. We don't do just symptom address. We go down to the soul and we start talking about even moral traumas and how to help heal from the inside out.
Well, everybody seems to be in a massive trauma here, recovering from the pandemic and all the prices going up and rents going up, and everybody freaking out that they're on the verge of being evicted or having their rent bumped up $800, and they have to make choices. Filling up with gas or buying a loaf of bread.
Right.
It's traumatizing.
That is traumatizing.
These prices
Poverty
are
is traumatizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a systemic trauma.
Well,
and it's not just traumatic for the individual that's living it.
Right.
Really. And the whole community needs healing. Thanks very much for being with us. We definitely appreciate you coming to New Mexico, coming to town, coming to the Peace Center, and hopefully we can join forces and serve the community that much better. And please check out their website and welcome them to the Peace Center and Albuquerque community.
Thank you so
Tom.
much for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hi, so we're back in the studio, and my guest right now is Selinda Guerrero, and she's been a great community organizer. She is putting on with a bunch of people the People's Juneteenth celebration later on this afternoon, starting at 4. She and a number of other people, a number of youth community groups got together and started Albuquerque Mutual Aid to bring donated food in, package food up, feed the hood, feed the community in the really hard times of the pandemic. She's been involved in a number of other political issues and rallies and working against police brutality and Black Lives Matters events. Let's welcome Selinda. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me here today.
So let's first talk about what's happening this afternoon at Roosevelt Park.
Yes, it's the People's Juneteenth. We've been going since 2018. We've been hosting the People's Juneteenth. It's a completely grassroots, with us, by us, for us initiative. And what we strive to do is provide some political education to community who might not be familiar with what Juneteenth represents or what it means to community that is still in the struggle. And so we provide political education. We also bring on a lot of local talent from artists, hip-hop, musicians, and poets who will come to share in the space as well. We are so honored. We organize with other community groups, so FAM will be there, free access to movements, helping to provide childcare so that folks feel safe and are able to engage fully, and the kids have lots of activities to do. We'll have free children's books, and of course, it's our value that everybody always gets to eat with us. And so we're just big shout out to Big John's Barbecue, who will be catering this year's food and cooking for us. And I think we also have some other folks that are going to be also sharing food in this space. We welcome also vendors are going to be out there with their local goods. So we always want to uplift our folks that are from our Black community that are trying to promote their businesses. So we always want to be uplifting community members in this space.
Cool. I was there about 2 years ago, and with my back problems, I was kind of hobbling around and stuff like that. But there were great vendors. The Peace Center was there helping with food and COVID supplies and stuff like that. And it's a really great event.
Thank you. Yes, and we will actually also have COVID testing available for folks, as well as masks and hygiene, and we'll have volunteers that will be helping with hygiene in the park. So we want to keep everybody safe in the community, while the event is going on.
Well, we had Nicole Rogers and Dee Brown a couple of weeks ago talking about the Civic Plaza event, and they spelled out a little bit of the history of Juneteenth in Texas and with the different communities that rejected the news and stuff like that. Can you give us a little rundown on the history, the actual beginning of Juneteenth?
Sure. In 1863 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was actually signed, but we had there were southern states that wanted a couple more harvests with their enslaved people. And so they actually did not release people as they were supposed to have when President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And so it went on until 1865. So it was almost 2 full years, 2 seasons of harvest that happened before the enslaved people of Galveston, Texas, in particular, had been freed. And so it took time, and then it wasn't until after that that the 13th Amendment was finally ratified and was still left with a loophole in it, and we talk about that right now in our work with the prison industrial complex and with the way capitalism exploits people who are still enslaved, and there's still indentured servitude today through the prison industrial complex. And so we still are not free. That is our message at Juneteenth, and that is the work that we're engaged in. So it's really, really important for folks to know, yes, we're celebrating that we are freer and that we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors who did tremendous work because it wasn't somebody who came in and saved us. It was actually the work of people organizing. It was Harriet Tubman. It was W.E.B. Du Bois. It was all those ancestors that were abolitionists that were fighting for freedom and organizing on the ground to be able to free people. So it's really important that our story often doesn't get told, and we want to be screaming it out loud because it gets left out a lot in history books. But we have always resisted, and we have always freed ourselves. And my dad comes from East Texas, my dad's side of the family, and ate in Jim Crow kitchens and was part of that legacy that came out of indentured servitude in the South, long before this was considered the United States. And so, there's deep connections for us all. And I think it's really important for us to continue to tell the truth about what this legacy is, what this history is of the abolition movement that started back then.
And I don't know if you guys can see Selinda's t-shirt, but it says, "No one's free until everyone's free." And I know you do a lot of work in the community. If you watch our montage, when I'm in that garden, that's the People's Garden. And I've also talked to your daughter up at the International District Garden. And I know that, tell me how, let's switch the subject a little bit. Tell me how Albuquerque Mutual Aid started. I know you started with a couple groups that you're associated with, the Fight for Our Lives kids, the climate change kids.
Sure. So we're, the groups that I organize with are Millions for Prisoners, Building Power for Black New Mexico, Save the Kids from Incarceration, are my primary groups. And we got together. We've always been in work and in cooperation with Fight for Our Lives, with the AAPRP, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and you know, all the other comrades in the community that collectively we make up like the 505 Coalition. So we're really happy to have that kind of solidarity. And what we recognized at the beginning of the pandemic was that we were getting a lot of inbox messages from community members that were telling us, hey, I can't find diapers. We can't get access to food. Do you know anywhere where I can go to get baby formula? Do you know where I can get toilet paper? Do you know where I can get hygiene products? We're really scared right now. We're on quarantine. Our family member has COVID. We can't leave our house. Like, all these stories were emerging in our inboxes, and we sat around my table in my house where we were organizing, and we said, what can we do? And we were 5 community organizers sitting around a table trying to strategize. And mutual aid has always been a value that we organize under. You know, we know that we live in abundance. We know that there's enough for everybody. And we believe in shared resources. And so we started to strategize around how can we start meeting these needs in a way that's not charity, because we don't have a value of charity. We have a value of solidarity. We know that these are our community members, and that you know, their survival is my survival and mine is theirs. So how do we all survive through this pandemic together? And so we started to build a grocery distribution. And, you know, this is not something new. This is something we learned from our ancestors. You know, the Black Panthers did it. Many groups before us have done this kind of work in mutual aid. And so we built a program, and our very first distribution out of the garage, it was 11 care packages that went out COVID safe to people's doorsteps. And now we've been 3 years strong. And this is still a buy us with this forest movement. You know, we don't get government money. We don't get, there's nobody, big funders coming in to support us. This is really by the community, and that's what is so beautiful about it. And so we have now distributed, it's somewhere in the 600,000 range of groceries to people's doorsteps throughout central New Mexico. Our volunteers have gone to all the way out to almost to Grants. They've gone up all through Santa Fe. They've gone up to Espanola. They've gone down to Socorro. They've gone to Edgewood. They've gone to Moriarty. So we've covered some ground. Our volunteers are absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I've been to your site a couple of times and made a couple of donations. How can people get to your site and keep you guys going?
Sure. So ffol.org is still our platform since the beginning. You can go on the website and you can read about mutual aid. You can request a care package there in English or Spanish. You can also make a donation there. And you can contact us if you'd like to volunteer. Our volunteer, and I don't like that word volunteer. I want to pull that back, but because we're comrades. We are a community who is working shoulder to shoulder in solidarity to support and uphold people in you know, that are struggling right now. And so we have nearly 400 people who have engaged with mutual aid over these 3 years. And the beautiful part of it is you can come at any capacity. You can come for 30 minutes on a lunch break and break down beans or put a few groceries in a bag, care package. You could pick up and deliver packages. You can also remote work with us. So you can do dispatch. You can do some of the behind the scenes stuff.
And where are you based right now?
Right now, we are so lucky to have a room at Nahalat Shalom down on Candelaria. In the North Valley, and they have been hosting us now for over a year. And so we are really lucky to have this partnership with Nahalat Shalom for them to have welcomed us.
Have any of the schools sent kids over there for service day?
Absolutely. We've had many youth come through, classes come in several times a week, students who will care package in the space and get to learn about what mutual aid is. And right now we have youth interns who are helping us out this summer.
Do you have a site where anybody can contact you about 1 million prisoners?
Yes, you can email us at millionsforprisonersnm@gmail.com. And if you're interested in getting involved in doing some work with us, Justin's going to come on and talk about our Millions for Prisoners work, so I want to leave space for that. But definitely, if you want to join our movement in any of the different ways, there's lots of places of engagement. And just, come and learn and grow with us. That's something that we know, is that there's a place for everybody in the movement. And we're all going to keep doing our work until we are all free and our people are safe in their communities and have their needs met.
Well, we really appreciate all the work you do in the community, and we really need to have you back on the show. Thank you very, very much for coming on. And like you said, Justin's coming up after our friend Striving is playing a song called Beginning the End, recorded at the Peace Center.
Hi, my name is Striving. I'd like to play you an original tune that I call Beginning the End. Oceans and mountains and rivers and lakes, castles and forests and things like earthquakes, they used to seem so vast. Back in the day, there were blacksmiths and tailors and ships with sailors, and sometimes they'd sail at half-mast. But now you can fly around the world in a day, have a bagel for breakfast and sushi for lunch, wear clothes from China, play games from Japan. Did you ever wonder where it would land? Tell me, where are we now? Is this beginning the end? The thought we'll survive, I won't pretend, 'cause this is beginning the end. It's clearer now, we're becoming all one. By the time you can stop it, it will be done. Tell me, where are we now? Is this beginning the end? The thought we'll survive, I won't pretend, 'cause this is beginning the end. When one nation has rules, and along come some fools who think they can help, and they introduce tools with no proper instruction, no common leads to destruction, and where hell. It's clear now, we're becoming all one. By the time you can stop it, it will be done. Tell me, where are we now? Is this beginning the end? It's clear now, we're becoming becoming all one. By the time you can stop me, it will be done. Tell me when. By the time we unite, because we just might, all our nations are one, but the planet is done, and so we'll have to fly off into space. Pew, pew, find a new planet with lots of space. We can be ourselves and work at our pace, till we do find it's our nature to waste, and the new planet deteriorates. Tell me where would we be then? We'd be beginning the end. The thought will survive, I won't pretend, 'cause this is beginning the end over again.
Now we're here with Justin Allen of Millions for Prisoners New Mexico. Justin's been on the show before. We've heard his history of his incarceration, and Justin came out, and you know, we watched him grow. He's turned his life around. Went to college. Is involved in a number of things, along with has worked with Selinda for a long time with Millions for Prisoners, and Justin continues to work with the incarcerated and providing rights, helping hands, and reintroduction to society for formerly incarcerated prisoners. Justin, welcome to That Saturday Show. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Good to see you again. You know, tell us what you're involved in right now. I know you're involved in some fairly serious bills in the New Mexico State Legislature.
Well, I began organizing with Millions for Prisoners in 2017. I was invited to speak about state violence that exists within the New Mexico Department of Corrections. Since then, I have been advocating for voting rights. It began at the county clerk's office, where I was denied several times based on prior history. Even though I was eligible and had the paperwork to show that I was eligible to vote, I was denied by county clerks. It literally took a standoff in the county clerk's office for me to get my voting rights granted. Selinda Guerrero stood with me and live streamed while we demanded my rights to be restored. And since then, I've realized that civic engagement is critical to reducing recidivism. When people have a say in the policies and lawmakers that impact their lives, they're less likely to inflict harm on themselves and community. So for me, I started volunteering. It was difficult to get a job because of my past. So I started showing up at the interim committees, and I was ultimately offered a job with America Votes to advocate to restore voting rights for people behind the walls. Originally, our bill started out to restore voting rights to people behind the walls like they do in Maine and Vermont. Maine and Vermont, they allow their prisoners to vote, and that's because those states are predominantly white. So this is an issue of systemic racism. We recognize disenfranchisement as a continuing mechanism of slavery that exists in the 21st century. So Millions for Prisoners is a movement to abolish slavery in the 21st century as we know it. Slavery has not been abolished, it's been reformed. And all of these mechanisms continue to exist to keep people down and oppressed.
And the U.S. far outstrips the world in incarcerated persons.
Excuse me?
The world far outstrips, the U.S. far outstrips the world in number of people in prisons.
Yeah, so disenfranchisement serves no purpose for deterring crime or rehabilitation. Its only purpose is perpetual punishment. And it's actually taxation without representation, because community members are paying taxes, they're paying bills, trying to function in society as citizens, but these barriers keep us down and discourage people from civic engagement and becoming engaged with community.
Yeah, it's a terrible system, and you're involved with America Votes, and are you involved in other initiatives for prisoners and release prisoners across the country?
So as Millions for Prisoners organizers, we advocate for legislation that are investments in humanity, and we stand against any legislation that expands the prison industrial complex. What that means is standing against mandatory minimums, criminal enhancements, and all these things that do nothing to deter crime, but actually manufacture so-called criminals.
Wow. So what exactly are the bills that you have been working on up in the state legislature, and how can people get involved in supporting your efforts?
We've worked on Ban the Box. That's where private employers can no longer ask individuals if they've been convicted of a felony. We got expungement passed. Our original bill for voting rights was redrafted by the House Judiciary Committee to allow people to, rather than letting them vote from in prison, it would allow individuals to vote immediately upon release from custody. Right now, New Mexico law requires individuals to complete probation and parole before voter eligibility. We recognize that as an implicit form of poll taxing that exists because individuals are required to pay fines and fees that are attached to probation and parole in order to complete probation and parole before they're eligible to vote. So poll taxing emerged during the Jim Crow era to prevent African American communities from voting. Basically, if they couldn't pay, they couldn't vote. And so that system still continues today. It's just called disenfranchisement. And so we're working to restore our community's voices.
Yeah, I know across the country, in a number of primarily red states, that they're doing their best to keep even former prisoners off the voting rolls. What efforts are being made? You know, one thing that we seem to see in New Mexico is there seems to be sort of a racket to continue the cycle and catch people. They're doing everything they can to do the proper paperwork, go to the proper classes, meet their parole regulations, and there always seems to be a little racket to trip these people up and get them right back in the system.
The system is designed for failure. I mean, when individuals don't have the opportunity to get employment, housing, and their basic needs met, we typically return to the lifestyle that put us in prison in the first place. Mm-hmm. Many of us have lived in survival mode, so it takes community engagement to really break that cycle of recidivism.
So I know there's some agencies out there, but are there direct community groups and maybe government offices that work to greet people when they get out and house them and point them towards jobs and maybe in some cases sobriety?
That's one thing that's lacking in our system. Individuals are not welcomed back in the community. It's all expectations. We're required to become productive members of society, meet the probation, parole requirements, pay fines and fees, and it's a system designed to keep people returning back to prison. It's a machine.
How many people roughly are incarcerated in New Mexico right now?
Honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that a lot of individuals go back on technical violations, dirty urines, and a lot of things that should be addressed in other ways than punishment. Substance abuse, for example, there are no resources for individuals to get help. Like, if I were to relapse today, I couldn't get into an inpatient program without getting on a waiting list. And by the time that happens, most individuals end up back in jail, overdosed, or on the streets.
Are there any new programs in the jails and prisons to legal or what do you want to call it? Life development, or getting you ready for when you're released back into society?
They have a program in New Mexico Department of Corrections called RDAP. It stands for Residential Alcohol and Drug Treatment. Excuse me. Prior to that, there was therapeutic communities, but all of these programs are just designed to make the Department of Corrections look like they're doing something, because the reality is when individuals go before the parole board, none of the college courses, none of the programs, none of that is recognized by parole board. And
it looks like everybody's really up against the wall with this. I know that you went through some terrible treatment in this in the system. And we've seen figures that, corrections officers are people are not applying for corrections recruitment. And so what are the conditions right now across the board?
There's a culture of violence that exists within New Mexico Department of Corrections and MDC. Typically when a prisoner is abused, the corrections officers get paid leave, and that's like a reward. That conditions corrections officers to think that behavior is okay, and it's incentive for abuse.
Do you have a website, a Facebook page, or email where people can contact you and support your legislation and support the efforts of released prisoners to acclimate back to society properly?
Millions for Prisoners has a Facebook page. We can be reached through Messenger. We also have an email address. It's millionsforprisonersnm@gmail.com.
Are your bills going through subcommittees this summer? And I guess we have the long session happening next January. Do you have particular lawmakers who are helping you sponsor these bills?
Currently, I'm working with Senator Katie Duhigg and Representative Gail Chasey. During the 30-day session last year, we had the House votes to get it passed. We also had the governor's support, but it was obstructed by the Senate filibuster.
I know the governor's been granting clemency to certain groups. This is another subject, but I think the people were concerned that they were letting people out for minor abuses for marijuana and drugs, but are they actually granting reprieves to these people, clearing their records?
I'm currently in the process of going through expungement, and I have to wait another couple years because there's time limits. But the problem with the expungement is that it's so expensive. I mean, typically a lawyer will charge $500 per case. There are 2 attorneys here in Albuquerque that do expungement that community members can work with. I believe Parrish Collins is doing pro bono expungement for people that don't have housing. And Jason Bowles is doing expungement for $1,000 for everything.
You're doing the real hard, right on the street work in the community. We want to thank you very much for being on the show again. People connect with Selinda, connect with Justin, help out mutual aid. We've pretty much reached the end of the show. I will see you in about 3 weeks. Stay safe, stay cool, have a wonderful summer, and we'll see you maybe in some form next week, but definitely see you around July 16th on that Saturday show. Thanks for watching.
Until the next time, it's time to say goodbye. When you out here in the streets, keep it real, 505. We love everybody, we just want to let you know. Thanks for tuning in to that Saturday show.